Welcome back, guys. We are working our way through Chapter 35 of the American Pageant, 13th edition. As we fight our way through World War II, we are now up to the invasion of France, known as D-Day. But we're going to get some background on D-Day first before we can actually get to the battle. And that background would be the Tehran Conference. So Tehran is the capital of Iran, and the Big Three are going to meet there for the first time as a group. The Big Three: Stalin from the Soviet Union, FDR from the US, and Churchill from the United Kingdom are going to meet. And at the Big Three, or excuse me, at the Tehran Conference, the Big Three are going to decide to work on coordinating their attack. So Stalin will launch a big, massive counterattack from the Soviet Union against the Germans. At the same time, America and Britain will launch an attack on France. Again, we're not attacking France because we don't like the French. We're attacking France because the Germans are there. The Germans occupied France back in 1940. So the preparations had been ongoing for literally for years. And by the time we get to spring of 1944, we've got about 3 million men gathered in England ready to fight. An American by the name of General Dwight David Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, will be given the overall command of the Allied Army. Dwight Eisenhower, better known as Ike, future President Dwight D. Eisenhower. There he is. And he's talking to some American paratroopers who are going to jump in the night before the D-Day invasion. They're going to jump in behind enemy lines in northern France. And if you look closely, you'll notice these soldiers are from the 101st Airborne. So where are they attacking? They're attacking a place called Normandy. Now, the most obvious place for us to invade from Britain to France would be at Calais. But we didn't choose Calais because it is heavily defended. Normandy is less heavily defended because it's a less likely place for us to attack. So we're going to go where the enemy doesn't expect us to go, and we're going to land here at Normandy and then invade and then head on down to here and liberate Paris. Now, we had done a pretty good job of convincing the Germans we were coming at Calais, and it's not just simple geography. German observation planes, as they would fly over here, they would see this big Allied army being developed. What they don't realize is that big Allied army is basically a fake army. And if you're a German observation plane from thousands of feet up, you can't tell the difference between an inflatable tank and a real tank. And so the Germans are expecting us to come here. We're going to attack there. And the invasion occurs on June 6, 1944. This, again, is called D-Day. The overall name for the operation is Operation Overlord. Some 4,600 ships, over 150,000 soldiers landed on 5 beaches: the American beaches of Utah and Omaha, the British and Canadian beaches of Gold, Juno, and Sword. And Omaha is going to be the one that's the most difficult, the most heavily defended, the most losses on D-Day. If you've seen the opening scene from Saving Private Ryan, as the guys land on the beach, that is depicting this battle at Omaha Beach. There's the beach today. There it is during the actual battle. By August of 1944, we've broken out from the bottleneck around Normandy, and we have fought our way all the way to Paris, which has been liberated. The Parisians have been living under German occupation for over 4 years at this point, and they're quite happy to see us go. They're quite happy to see us. They're also quite happy to punish those they see as collaborators, people who had basically worked with the Germans. They're seen as traitors, and they want to, the Parisians want to punish them. This brings us back to some politics. So by 1944, November of 44, we're ready for another presidential election, and the Republicans are hoping to win. They haven't won since 1928. It's now 1944. How can they stop FDR? And they're going to turn to a young man named Thomas E. Dewey. Thomas E. Dewey had made a reputation as being a prosecutor in New York going after mafia targets. So he's a guy who's got a reputation as a man who can get something done, not afraid to go after big targets. And his platform is basically, let's finish up this war, create some sort of new international organization, something along the lines of what we talked about with the Atlantic Charter, and obviously preview what's going to be the United Nations eventually, and then maintain the peace, so to prevent future wars like World War II. Now, the Democrats, obviously, they're going to turn to FDR for a 4th time. but he's getting up in years. He's 62 at this point. There were quite a few rumors about his poor health, and it was more than just rumor. Even though the Roosevelt administration tried to keep it a secret, Roosevelt was in poor health. And so there's a lot of attention given to who he's going to choose as his running mate. And what he's going to do is he's going to get rid of his current vice president, Henry A. Wallace, because Wallace was seen as too liberal and someone who might create some loss of support, particularly in the conservative South, where a lot of Southern Democrats are needed for FDR to win. And so instead, FDR is going to choose a pretty inconspicuous, a relative unknown, a senator from Missouri named Harry S. Truman. The S is literally his middle name. The S doesn't stand for anything. It's his middle name is actually S. So why is FDR going to win? Well, a couple of reasons. He's FDR, first of all, obviously. Number two, the war is going well. The war is almost over. He's seen as a guy who's necessary to finish the war and also build the peace after the war. It is interesting, though, if you look at the results, however, this is FDR's least impressive result. So his fourth election is also his weakest. I mean, he's still winning by a big margin, right? But there's definitely some FDR fatigue, I think, going on. Anytime you elect a person 4 times, you got to imagine people are getting a little tired of him. All right, let's finish up Hitler over in Europe. And the situation by late 1944 is not good for Germany. They are being bombarded round the clock by bombers. Typically, the British would bomb at night. Americans bomb during the day. The Soviets are coming in from the east. The British and Americans coming in from the west, but also from the south, from Italy. So the Germans are fighting on all sides. They're running out of everything. They've been at war now for 5 years. They're an exhausted nation. And you can kind of see it in the pictures, right? The German POWs being rounded up, they're done. Like, they don't want to fight in a war they know they can't win. And Hitler's army is also looking suspiciously young and suspiciously old at this point. He's having to really scrape the bottom of the barrel. Having said all that, even though we were convinced Hitler was basically done by the end of 1944, he wasn't. His last reserves in the West. He throws against us in a surprise counterattack known as the Battle of the Bulge. And it's called the Battle of the Bulge because of the shape that's created in the line. So here's basically the front line before the battle, and then the Germans counterattack, and they gain this land right here, creating this bulge in the front lines. And this is something that most Americans did not see coming. Now, Hitler's plan is incredibly ambitious, and of course it's not going to work. Their goal is to basically attack through here, hopefully get to Antwerp, get all the supplies they need because this is a major port, split the Americans from the British, and also somehow, some way, create a separate peace with the Western Allies over here so they can turn his army around and face the oncoming Soviets. Now, again, that's never going to happen, but Hitler's obviously desperate and paranoid, and, well, he's Hitler. He makes a lot of mistakes. Nonetheless, the Germans do catch us by surprise, capture quite a few American soldiers. Quite a few Americans are actually killed after surrendering by the Germans during this battle. So it's a pretty brutal fight. It's also extremely cold. My grandfather fought in this battle, and he tells me that it's just unbelievably cold. The kind of cold where you feel like you can never warm up from. So Americans and Germans both suffering from frostbite, trench foot, all that stuff. Now, at the end, this attack, of course, can't succeed. He's never going to get to Antwerp. What's going to happen is the sun is going to come back out, the clouds are going to roll away, the American air power, British air power is able to punish the Germans, and the Germans lose everything they'd gained in this battle. There's one place to point out, though. It's a great example of American stubbornness, I guess we'll say. The city of Bastogne. This is where the 101st Airborne was stationed, or at least elements of the 101st Airborne. They were surrounded by the Germans. They refused to surrender, never did, stood up to the Germans, and again, the Germans eventually pushed back, and they've lost everything they had gained. By the spring of 45, the Americans and the Soviets have met at the River Elbe, so we're basically meeting here, the Americans and the British on one side, Soviets coming from the other, and all that's really left is the city of Berlin. Now, as the Soviet and also Western Allies move into Nazi territory, what they uncover, of course, is the Holocaust. the concentration camps, the death camps. Now, it's the Allies certainly knew that there was something going on with the Holocaust. They knew there were camps. They knew there was slave labor being used. But the full extent of the horror, the inhumanity, was not known until these camps are found. And the soldiers who liberate these places just can't believe their eyes. And this picture on the left shows, you've got American soldiers here, some MPs, forcing German civilians from the local neighborhood to come by and see what's there, because they don't want the Germans to deny what happened. They want them to see what their government had been doing. You can't deny this when you see it in real life. Now, FDR has faced some criticism for not doing more to kind of limit the death toll when it comes to the Holocaust. I don't know how valid some of those criticisms are. I don't know that a whole lot more could have been done. There's certainly some things that could have been done before we got involved in the war by letting more refugees in to America. But once the war is going, I don't know how much more FDR could have done to limit this. I think we really need to focus on blaming the Nazis, not FDR. FDR does not survive to see the very end of the war. Not even a month before the war ends, he dies from a stroke in Warm Springs, Georgia. And this painting on the left, the reason it's undone is he was actually sitting for this portrait when he died. And the shock for Americans was very real. I mean, this guy had been president now for 12 years. And for a lot of Americans, they didn't really know any other president than FDR. It was just a shock to the system that here we are on the cusp of victory, and then FDR dies. 18 days later, there's another death. This one is Hitler's. This one, of course, by his own hand. Hitler commits suicide along with his wife, his very recent wife, Eva Braun, and his bunker in Berlin. Hitler does not want to be captured. He does not want to be strung up by his ankles like Mussolini. He does not want to be held accountable for his actions, and so he takes his own life. And this is one of the last pictures of Hitler taken during the war. It does this on April 20th. He comes out of his bunker, which also happens to be his birthday, by the way, shaking hands with his soldiers, I guess we'll call them. And there's the Soviet flag being raised over the Reichstag in downtown Berlin. Actually, I think that's the Reichschancellor. I don't think that's the Reichstag, but it's a German building nonetheless. By May 7th, the Nazis have surrendered. May 8th was declared Victory in Europe Day, or VE Day, and now we've got the Nazis done. So the Italians and the Nazis of Germany have surrendered unconditionally. The war is basically 2/3 of the way done, and there's a lot of celebration at home. But again, it's a little bittersweet because we know that the war is not totally done. We still have Japan to deal with, and that is going to be our topic of our next video.